Here's something nobody warns you about before you try installing this tool. Most software gives you one obvious way to put it on your computer. This one gives you 4 completely different paths, and picking the wrong one for your situation is exactly how people end up stuck at 2 in the morning staring at the 17th error message on their screen, wondering why a tool with hundreds of thousands of stars on its project page is somehow fighting them this hard. The frustrating part is, the install itself usually isn't broken. The person just picked a path that was never meant for their setup in the first place. So in this video, we're going to walk through every single installation path this tool offers, exactly who each one is actually built for, and the specific errors people run into on each one, so you don't have to discover them the hard way. By the end, you'll know exactly which path is right for your machine and how to actually get through it without any surprises. Before we get into it, quick favor. If you find this kind of practical breakdown useful, go ahead and hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep making videos like this one. Now let's get into it. Quick note before we start. If you've already watched other videos on this channel, you probably know we've already covered what happens after installation, meaning the actual onboarding wizard that turns this from a bare program into a working AI agent, plus a full walkthrough on how to actually use it day to day once it's running, and even a complete guide on properly removing it if you ever decide to. This video sits specifically before all of that. We're only focused on one thing here: getting the program correctly and safely onto your machine in the first place, using whichever path genuinely fits how you work. Once you're done here, those other videos pick up exactly where this one leaves off. Before we go through each installation method, here's the simplest way to think about them. One method is for beginners, one is for developers, one is for servers and always-on systems, and one is for advanced Linux users who already manage their entire system with a declarative package manager. Once you know which category you fall into, choosing the right installation path becomes much easier. Let's start with the simplest, fastest, most beginner-friendly path there is, because honestly, this is the one almost everyone should start with unless they have a specific reason not to. It's a single line you paste into your terminal, and it handles nearly everything automatically behind the scenes. No decisions to make, no configuration files to think about, just one command that downloads and sets up the core program for you. If you're on macOS or Linux, this is genuinely a copy, paste, and wait situation. It even attempts to install the underlying runtime environment for you automatically if your system doesn't already have a compatible version. Here's when this simple method makes total sense. You just want to try this thing out. You're not planning to run it on a server somewhere. You don't have a complicated existing developer setup you're worried about conflicting with. You just want the fastest possible route from zero to a working command line tool on your own personal computer. For probably 8 out of every 10 people watching this, that one-line method is genuinely all you'll ever need, and there's no shame in stopping right there and never touching the more advanced paths at all. That said, even this simplest path has one common hiccup worth knowing about ahead of time. On macOS and Linux specifically, you'll sometimes hit a permission error partway through, especially if your system's global installation directory requires elevated access to write to. If that happens, it's not a sign anything actually went wrong with the installer itself. It just means your system wants explicit permission before writing to that protected folder.
The fix is simply rerunning that exact same command with elevated privileges added in front of it, and it'll sail through the second time. Now let's move to the second path, which is the one most regular ongoing users actually end up on, even if they started with the simple script above. This is installing through a package manager, most commonly the one that comes bundled with the underlying JavaScript runtime. Instead of one big automatic script, you're installing it the same way you'd install any other command line package, globally, so it's available from anywhere on your system. Why would you choose this over the simple one-line script? A few real reasons. First, updates become dramatically easier, since bumping to a newer version later is just rerunning the same install command with a version flag, rather than starting over completely. Second, if you're someone who already works with this kind of runtime environment regularly for other projects, this method fits naturally into a workflow you already understand, rather than introducing a separate mystery script you didn't write yourself. Third, if you ever want to switch between multiple versions of the tool, or roll back if a newer release breaks something for you, this method gives you far more direct control than the one-line script does. For example, if you already use npm every day for other projects, this installation method will probably feel like the most natural choice because it fits perfectly into a workflow you already know. The trade-off here is that you need that underlying runtime already properly installed and correctly recognized by your system before you even start, which introduces the exact kind of friction the one-line script tries to hide from you in the first place. And this leads us straight into the single most common installation complaint you'll find anywhere online about this tool. You run the install successfully, Everything looks fine, no errors at all. And then you try running the actual program's command, and your terminal responds as if it's never heard of it. This is almost never a failed installation. It's a path recognition issue. The package manager installed the program into a folder that your terminal simply doesn't know to look inside. The fix involves finding exactly where that global folder lives on your specific system, then adding that location to your terminal's list of recognized command locations, and reopening your terminal afterward so the change actually takes effect. Once that's done, the exact same command that failed a minute ago will work instantly. Now let's talk about the third path, which is built for a completely different situation than the first two, running this inside Docker containers. If personal casual use is what the first two paths are for, this one is squarely aimed at people planning to run this on a server, a home lab machine, or anywhere they care deeply about isolation. The entire program, along with everything it needs to run, gets packaged into a self-contained container that operates separately from the rest of your actual operating system. For example, if you want OpenClaw running 24 hours a day on a home server so it can automatically send you a morning briefing every day, Docker is probably your best choice. The rest of your text continues exactly as before. The trade-off with this path is added complexity. You're now managing container lifecycles instead of just running a simple command. Stopping, removing, and updating the tool means learning a slightly different set of steps than the two paths before it. But if you're the kind of person who's already comfortable with containers for other projects, this friction is minor, and the safety benefit is absolutely worth it. The fourth path, and this one's genuinely a smaller niche, is installing through a specific declarative package manager popular mainly among certain Linux users who care deeply about reproducible system configurations. If you already use this kind of package manager for literally everything else on your machine, you'll know exactly why you'd want this tool available the same consistent way.
If you've never heard of this approach before right now, that's a pretty reliable sign it's not the path meant for you, and one of the first three options above will serve you far better. Now, let's spend some real time specifically on Windows, because this is genuinely where the most confusion happens and where picking the wrong subpath costs people the most frustration later on. You actually have two meaningfully different routes on Windows, and they are not equivalent, even though they might look similar on the surface. The first is running the installer natively through PowerShell directly on Windows itself. The second is setting up a Linux-style environment built directly into Windows and running the exact same Linux install commands from the first three paths we already covered inside that environment instead. Here's the part that catches people off guard. The native PowerShell route works, and for simple, occasional use, it's genuinely fine. But the background service that's supposed to keep this tool running continuously, surviving reboots without you thinking about it, behaves far more reliably inside that Linux-style environment than it does running natively on raw Windows. If you're planning to use this tool seriously, meaning connecting it to messaging apps, scheduling automated tasks, wanting it running reliably in the background for weeks at a time, the Linux environment route is genuinely the one worth setting up first, even though it takes roughly 10 extra minutes up front. If you've never used WSL before, don't worry. It usually takes around 10 minutes to set up once, and after that, you'll rarely have to think about it again. If you do go the native PowerShell route anyway, there's one Windows-specific step almost nobody expects the first time. Windows blocks locally run scripts by default as a built-in safety measure. So before the installer will even run, you need to loosen that restriction slightly with a specific PowerShell command, then fully close and reopen PowerShell so your system properly recognizes the change. Skip that step, and the installer simply refuses to run at all, which understandably looks like a broken installation when it's actually just Windows protecting itself exactly as designed. Before we wrap up, let's quickly cover the 5 installation problems people run into most often. The first is permission denied. If the installer can't write to a protected directory, rerun the installation with elevated privileges. On most systems, that's all it takes. The second is command not found. This almost always means the installation succeeded, but your terminal doesn't know where the global installation directory is. Add that location to your path, restart your terminal, and try again. The third is using an outdated JavaScript runtime. If your installed version is older than the version OpenClaw requires, update the runtime first before troubleshooting anything else. The fourth is PowerShell refusing to run the installer. On Windows, this is usually caused by the default execution policy blocking local scripts. Adjust the execution policy, reopen PowerShell, and rerun the installer. And finally, if you're installing with Docker and the containers refuse to start, make sure the Docker daemon is actually running before assuming anything is wrong with OpenClaw itself. So, quick decision guide to close this out. Just want to try it out fast on your own personal computer? Use the one-line script. Already comfortable with package managers and want easy updates down the line? Use the package manager route. Planning to run this on a server or care deeply about isolating it from the rest of your system? Use Docker. Already deep into a specific declarative Linux package ecosystem? You already know who you are. Use that. And if you're on Windows and planning any kind of serious long-term use, set up that Linux-style environment first, then follow the same steps as macOS and Linux from there.
Once you've got the program actually installed using whichever path fits you, remember, that's genuinely only step one. It won't do anything on its own yet. The actual setup wizard that turns it into a working AI agent, plus everything about actually using it day to day, is covered start to finish in other videos on this channel, so go check those out next if you haven't already. If this helped you actually pick the right installation path instead of guessing, that like button and a quick comment genuinely help this channel keep going, and subscribing means you won't miss what comes next. See you in the next video.